Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Ameenah and welcome to another episode of Prophet. Today we're going to be interviewing a very special guest today, Dr. Ishrat Husain, a key figure in Pakistan's economic history. From his time as governor of the State Bank of Pakistan to his influential work at the World Bank, Dr. Hussain has authored several books on economic reforms and institutions in Pakistan. He's worked in education, government ministries. He's a living legend who has seen it all, and we have a lot to learn from him. So let's get right into it. So firstly, I would like to ask you the core value behind economics and sort of like the fundamental principles behind studying the economy as a whole. So like the kind of things that economists might want to achieve by studying this concept in and of itself.
See, the resources at the disposal of mankind are quite scarce. They are not abundant.
Yeah.
Therefore, the economists have to make serious decisions as to how to allocate these resources for the general benefit of the majority of the population.
Yep.
And these are decisions which are going to affect not only the present generation but also the future generation. Because if you are able to deplete all your natural resources, then the future generations are deprived of those natural resources.
Yep.
So you have to be judicious, not only for the benefit of the present generation, but you have to also take care of the future generation.
Yep.
Similarly, the human capital is also related to the present as well as the future. If you don't educate your children appropriately, then the next generation will not be able to perform. So both on the natural as well as the human capital, you have to be conscious of the fact that you don't exhaust those resources, but you also leave something for the future.
जी. So you mentioned the well-being of like the present generation and the future generation.
Yeah.
तो जैसे हम में से बहुत से लोग like economic growth को GDP से measure करते हैं because we think GDP per capita and all of that is an indicator of economic growth. So to what extent do you think that is a good way to measure it? Because हम लोग human well-being को उसके अंदर exactly कैसे capture कर रहे होते हैं?
Now the concept has moved away from GDP. It is a more comprehensive concept, which is the Human Development Index.
Yep.
In Human Development Index, we take health, education, and income.
Yep.
And income is represented by GDP.
जी.
So it's only one of the three components.
Yeah.
If you are not doing well on education and you are not doing well in health, then income per se will not lead to the well-being or the prosperity of the nation.
Yeah.
That's why the concept has now been broadened. So we look at all the three aspects.
Yep.
Similarly, when we used to measure poverty, the traditional tool was what is the per capita income and how many people are living below that per capita income and how many are living beyond or higher than per capita income. Today, the concept is multidimensional poverty. Access to education,
Yep.
access to health,
Yep.
access to drinking water, sewage, sanitation, and income. So now, both at the well-being through the human capital index and also the multidimensional poverty, the debate has been evolving over time. And now we have to consider the environmental, the pollution, the hazards, the wildlife, all those things because of the changing climate risks. So I hope that in future, like the Human Development Index, we have even a broader index which takes into account of the risks of the climate change.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, कि अब Human Development Index is something that a lot of us are moving toward, and GDP has become somewhat of an outdated measure. Like
It's one of the components. It's not
Yeah.
outdated in the sense
Yeah.
you still have to generate incomes in order to live
Yeah.
life. So you cannot take away the incomes are very essential, but it's only one of the components for representing the well-being of a nation or a country.
Yep, of course.
Yeah.
So, वैसे how likely do you think it is? Because अभी a lot of countries are juggling to find that balance between like growth भी हो रही है, and we're also like working on the environment, because you also mentioned that ki pollution and all of that. So how should a country like Pakistan in specific be managing those two?
There are several ways, because we are not generating so much of carbon dioxide emissions as the countries like US, China, and India are doing. But we are vulnerable to the climate change risks. So what we have to do is concentrate on those items where we will be able to mitigate, adapt these risks. So for example, the biggest risk is the food, energy, and water nexus.
Yeah.
Because we are dependent on glaciers for our water resources. So if the glaciers are melting erratically, creating floods and creating droughts at the same time, we have to concentrate on conserving and preserving our water resources and also storing them, so that when the things are bad, then we can take care of the water requirements. At the same time, we have to think about new varieties of seeds which are drought resistant, which are heat resistant, which are pest resistant, so that our yields per acre remain the same, but at the same time, we are safeguarding from the future hazards. That, I think, is what the nature of our research should be by agriculture scientists. If we don't do that, then we are going to have a very difficult situation. We are doing flood irrigation, and we are wasting a lot of our very precious resource. We have to go for a sprinkler irrigation. We have to go for drip irrigation so that we are able to conserve water. We have to charge water according to its scarce value. So if you are using water for rice or for sugarcane, you should be paying much higher than those who are using it for maize or wheat or for other crops. These are the policy changes which are required to be implemented if we want to keep the balance for the future. The second is that we have to move away from fossil fuels like oil and gas towards the solar, wind, bagasse, biomass, those kind of, even nuclear and hydro, so that we are able to maximize the consumption of those fuels which are renewable as compared to the fossil fuels. So the carbon dioxide emissions are really reduced. Then we have to use electrical vehicles. The rickshaws, for example, the motorcycles in Pakistan are very rampant as far as the mobility is concerned. So we have to move away from the present, oil-based or gasoline-based motorcycles and rickshaws, and we should go for the electric vehicles or the hybrid vehicles in order to preserve the carbon dioxide, emissions under control.
So these were a few of the reforms that you've discussed regarding the environment, कि pollution को कैसे कम करना, etc. What kind of reforms or policy changes do you think Pakistan should take in regards to like our workers, laborers, the people living in poverty? तो उनके लिए क्या हमें अभी करना चाहिए?
देखिए, you cannot do anything unless your population is literate. So if you have a farmer and the farmer cannot read the instructions of how to use fertilizer or how to use pesticides, then you are going to have a serious difficulty. So we have an obligation as a policy to have 100% literacy rate. We are only 60% literacy rate. So we are 40% of our population doesn't have the basic literary skills. So we have to invest in our schooling and educational system. Then we have to give for the technical and vocational training. So for example, if you are a mechanic, you must know what is really behind the whole mechanical apparatus of that machinery. If you don't know that, you're not able to do it. So you have to train them in vocational and technical skills. We don't do that.
Yeah.
We send everybody to high school, everybody to college, and then we have a lot of unemployment. Because what the country needs is more electricians, more plumbers, more mechanics, more nurses, more paramedicals.
Yeah.
But we're not producing them. We're producing graduates who do not have the employable skills. So the policy should shift from generalized education to the vocational and technical education.
Yeah.
And then at the school level, we have to emphasize science and mathematics, because the future technologies are very much dependent on science, technology, and mathematics. So even from your middle school, you should be given science and maths as a compulsory subjects, and we should have teachers and also labs where the kids can actually work with their own hands, because that's the best way of learning. And make math and science fun rather than something which is an imposition. So you start from the schooling, and then some of them will go for technical and vocational training. Some of them will become medical doctors, some become engineers, some become IT computer specialists, some become, accountants. So then you have the many choices. But at least the schooling should emphasize on like English or Urdu, math and science should be given the same or even greater importance.
Yeah. So because you've worked in education as well and you've talked a lot about technical and vocational training,
Right.
इसके अंदर से बहुत सी चीज़ों, so like becoming an accountant or a doctor per se is something that is happening a lot maybe within like the upper middle classes and that kind of stuff. लेकिन फिर उनका ये issue होता है कि a lot of them, when they go to study abroad, they start living abroad as well, which I think is termed as brain drain. And like a lot of the people who do end up staying, उनकी education ही नहीं वैसी होती like public schools के अंदर. So how do you think like both sort of problems can be catered to?
Most of the professional education these days is subsidized by the government. For example, if you go to a medical university, public sector, I'm not talking of the private sector university, the government is spending about 5 million rupees in producing a doctor, right? 80% of the medical profession admissions today are for girls because they do well. They are very hardworking and they are much better than the boys. So when you have a merit-based admission system, the girls get preference because they do well. So that there's no quota now for girls and the boys. And therefore, when you are investing 5 million per person, and when they graduate, only 30% of them go and join the profession, you have wasted huge amount of human talent as well as you have wasted financial resources. So the message which I keep on giving to the parents and the future, fathers-in-law and mothers-in-law, that please encourage your girls who have acquired proficiency in any particular specialized field to contribute towards the economic and social development of the country. Our female labor force participation rate is very low. And that also because most of the females work on the farms, which is unpaid labor. So if you take the formal urban sectors, you don't find many girls. although they are very qualified, they are very bright. So my message to everyone in Pakistan is that please allow your daughters, your sisters, your mothers to invest themselves in the human capital, and then that human capital should be used for the betterment of the country. Otherwise, 50% of our population is not making any contribution. So you are not generating the kind of incomes which you require for improvement of the living standards. And Bangladesh, you see, they were like us till 1971. The females are doing extremely well, and that's why Bangladesh is doing so well.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So we've discussed educational reforms, environment ko kaise protect karna and all. What do you think is sort of like the driving force behind this? Because aapki jo book hai, Governing the Ungovernable, you've talked a lot about institutions, and you've compared countries like Bangladesh in there as well. So what do you think is Pakistan's sort of stance that it should be taking right now?
There are 3 or 4 drivers of economic and social progress. One is that you must have political stability. You cannot have 18 prime ministers from 1999 to 2024 because every time a new prime minister comes in, he abandons everything which was done in the past and starts from the scratch. And by the time in the middle of 2 years, he is removed and somebody else comes. So there is no political stability. When there is no political stability, the private sector does not feel very confident to invest because they don't know what the policies are going to be under the new prime minister or after him. So they're very shy. And unless you invest in your industry, in your agriculture, in your services sector, you're not going to have a higher incomes because investment is the driving force for the GDP growth, right? So you need political stability so that the businesses are confident that they can do well as far as their own investments are concerned. The second is that you must have strong institutions of governance. That means people are selected to become the chief executives of our institutions or the heads of our institution based on merit and performance rather than just having some connections with some political leaders or some MNAs or MPAs. China is a very good example where although it is a communist party, it's a one-party rule, but all the positions at the provincial level, at the county level, at the town level, at the village level are selected on the basis of merit alone. So the promotions are also made on the basis of merit. And look at what China has been able to do it. Unless we strengthen our institutions, because if you have the right person, the right job, the whole institution will actually do well. But if you're a wrong person, then the institution will dysfunction. So that is the number 2, that you must have the institutions. Number 3 is that you have to invest in human resources. That 60% is our literacy rate. That means the 40% of our population is not really equipped to contribute in any field they are. So an illiterate farmer is producing maybe, I would say, 30 months of wheat. But a literate farmer says, I know how much inputs we have to apply, at what time we have to apply. I have to listen to the weather forecast, and therefore he takes the informed decision. He may have a small land holding, but because he's literate and his antenna are quite up, he does better than the other one who is illiterate. So I've seen farmers in the same ecological zone where one literate farmer is producing 35 mons and the illiterate farmer is producing only 25 or 30 mons. Imagine if you had illiterate farmers, our average national yields would be much higher. And we will be quite self-sufficient. We don't have to import wheat, we don't have to import sugar, we have to import palm oil. So what I'm saying is that the human capital is very, very important as far as the investment is concerned. And finally, the fourth element is that we have to absorb, assimilate, and apply new technological tools. We should not be afraid that now artificial intelligence is coming in, so we will be jobless. No, it's a human being which should be using the artificial intelligence. So we should try to equip ourselves with the basic tools which will allow us to use the technological advances for the benefit of the country and for the nation. So these are the driving forces, in my view, which should inform our policy in the future.
Yep, makes sense. So you talked about how like institutions and all of those really are very like an integral role of growth.
Right.
और उसके अंदर आपने political stability की भी बात की. So a lot of people have this misconception maybe कि oh we only achieve growth when we have foreign aid coming in या फिर when we're not under military dictatorship and all. So because you worked under a lot of governments and आपको सबका experience है, to what extent do you think that is true or is not?
It's not true.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense when people talk about that.
Yeah.
Because no country in the world has been on what I call crutches of the foreign assistance and taking off. We have been going to the IMF for the last 24 times.
Yeah.
We haven't improved.
Yeah.
But before 1988, we went to IMF maybe only one or twice. But at that time, we were growing by 6% per annum, one of the fastest developing countries. India was way behind us.
Yeah.
So look, in a period where you were depending on the foreign aid, you have performed poorly. But when you didn't have foreign aid, much of foreign aid, then you were doing quite well because there were reforms by successive governments in order to improve the productive capacity of the economy. Unless you improve the productive capacity of the economy, all this money which comes from the foreign aid will disappear with no contribution as far as improvement of the economy is concerned. So I don't buy that. I think we have to stand on our own feet. But we should use foreign capital, FDI, technology, managerial practices, marketing, in order to sell our goods. So I'm very much in favor of FDI, foreign direct investment, but as a vehicle for absorbing technology, best practices of managerial performance, and international marketing links. To that extent, foreign direct investment is right. But aid per se is driven by the agenda of the donors. That's not driven by the agenda of the country. So I'm very much opposed, and I'm very happy that US no longer provides aid to Pakistan. A lot of people say, oh, the mulk to khatam ho jayega agar hame American aid nahi milegi. But look, we have to do things which are right for our own selves.
So you've talked a lot about human capital along with meritocracy and all. So Jesse, you said कि 60% of the population is literate, like and 40% is not. That sort of shows the economic inequality that's sort of like very evident in Pakistan today as well. So to what extent do you think like government अभी इसके ऊपर कुछ कर सकती है? Like instead of sort of like, क्योंकि ये बहुत idealistic बात भी है कि everybody's going to have equal outcomes and all.
You cannot have that.
Yeah. So equal opportunities.
Equal opportunities is the right word, but not the equal outcomes. The outcome is a function of the opportunity as well as your own effort. So, for example, in your class, you will have your colleagues, some of them are working very hard, very seriously, and some of them are relaxing and they're not doing well. You cannot imagine that all of them will have the equal outcomes. That's not possible. But we should have equal opportunities. So my take is that like the Benazir Income Support Program, we should provide cash transfers to the poor households but at the same time, ask them to send their children to school,
Yeah.
to have good nutrition, to have the vocational training for the adults. So it is a package deal. So you are actually improving their employability, but at the same time helping them to sustain their living standards.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will be starving. So social protection is the basis for poverty eradication, but at the same time, you have to give them the tool in order to invest in their generation, the new generation of the children, to improve their skill sets, improve their educational standards, and then they will do well. So that is how social protection as well as the training and education, they combine will improve people from poverty to middle class, and that's what most of the countries have done.
Yep. Yeah. So you mentioned like targeted cash programs,
Yeah.
जैसे बेनज़ीर income support
Right.
program है. So a lot of debate has been about like whether or not Pakistan should have something like a universal basic income program. So with either of those, to what extent do you think like हमारे taxes को फर्क पड़ेगा और कितना
I'm
पड़ना
not
चाहिए?
in support, because if I can afford
Yeah.
to pay for all the services, utilities, electricity, gas, because my income allows them to pay without subsidy,
Yeah.
I don't want universal basic income.
Yeah.
But those poor people who do not have the opportunities, I think this money of subsidies should
Yeah.
go to them. And that is the fair, distribution of the burden. And I should pay taxes because I'm earning so much, and most of the taxes should be used for human capital, for infrastructure, and for social protection.
Yeah.
That is a bargain I am in favor of. But why should there be universal basic income?
Yeah.
Because I don't think that has succeeded anywhere, or this is going to succeed in this country. So we have to be very careful about
Yeah.
these prescriptions.
So you've discussed a lot of like reforms that ought to be brought, or like Pakistan को ये लाने चाहिए if we want any growth in the long run. लेकिन आपको क्या लगता है like अभी पाकिस्तान के क्या prospects लग रहे हैं? How much of this do you think is going to be feasible in the coming generation?
These are feasible, but
Yeah.
there should be a consensus and willingness to implement it. We have all the right strategy papers, we have right policies, we have a lot of thinking as far what is wrong with the country and what can be done. And we know the prescriptions and we know the solutions to our problems, but we are not seriously doing anything in order to continue. You cannot have a 5-year electoral cycle to expect that there will be, a takeoff. It is a long haul. So one country, one party comes to power. If they do well, they should be allowed to be elected next time.
Yeah.
And in next 10 years, we will better off because you have continuity of the economic policies.
Yeah.
And that is what my plea is, that we should give chances to the people on the basis of their political performance rather than anything else.
Yep, definitely. So lastly, I just wanted to ask, like, what would be your advice to kids and children just around Pakistan who want to make a difference in the world,
Yeah.
be it through like poverty alleviation, environment, can their education sector, whatever it is?
Whatever profession they choose for themselves, they must work hard
Yeah,
and not go for the shortcuts.
yeah,
That you cram up the material given by your teachers, you reproduce that at the examination, or you do cheating at the examination, you get a degree and you think you have done well. Future is bleak for these people.
yeah,
Those who work hard, they absorb the knowledge and they apply that knowledge to solve the problems of this country, they are going to be successful. There is no shortcut for success. It is a long haul. And I can tell you from my own experience that people who were not brightest, who were mediocres, but they remained honest, they worked hard, they did not indulge in any shortcuts, they had a much better future than those bright young men and women who wanted to do the shortcuts, who were dishonest, who were corrupt. Their careers were spoiled. So my message is there is no substitute for integrity, honesty, and hard work. If you do that, you will be successful. You will have difficulties in the meanwhile, but ultimately you will come out as a winner. And those who want the shortcut, कि मुझे रातों रात मुझे गाड़ी भी मिल जाए, मुझे घर भी मिल जाए, चाहे मैं अनएथिकल प्रैक्टिसेस करूं, उनका फ्यूचर जो है वो ब्लीक है. That's my message to all the young men and women. और ये आपने टिकटॉक और इंस्टाग्राम की जो मेंटालिटी है, you are not focusing so much on the substantive part of knowledge. That is wrong. It's superficial knowledge से आपका काम नहीं होगा. आपकी attention span जो है इस वक्त कम हो गई है. आपकी जितने भी आपके colleagues हैं, वो उनका attention span जो है वो बहुत कम है. They will only touch the surface. They will not go in depth. और knowledge जो आती है वो in depth जाती है.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
my pleasure. I always like the young men and women to be asking the questions, and you asked the very right questions, and I'm very glad to have this interview.
Thank you.
All right.